So it takes an awful lot to keep that going. That
Absolutely.
behind the scenes work, you go in there and the displays are up, and you know that it took time to. If anybody's hung a picture, they know that takes some doing.
You know, I don't know if people realize between the conceptual level of what you have to do to put on a show that has some cohesion and that has some dynamic and drama, which I'm a big, I'm famous for saying, so what's the wow factor?
Yeah.
And to have the right balance of scholarship and showmanship, to make all the loans, then to do all the writing and label production and loan forms, and to publicize it properly, to raise the funds to keep it going, to have due diligence on our financial reports.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extraordinary amount of work.
Yeah. Well, it's I'm not involved in the museum, but I can appreciate all the work that goes into it.
It's a lot. It's a
especially
big
after
production.
hearing what you said.
It's a big production operation.
Yeah. How do they pick themes of what they're going to do? Who makes? You're the curator. I guess you make that decision.
I'm the chief artistic
Do you go
director.
scouting all over
I
the
scout
place?
constantly. I scout all over New England, in artist studios, in collectors' homes, in galleries, at other museums,
So
and
no rock
and
left
then
unturned.
no rock left unturned, and also in the greater New York area, which is the nexus of the international and national art movement. Occasionally, I borrow from farther afield, an artist in Washington, D.C., or an artist in Philadelphia. And there are artists all across the country. There are artists all over Europe. There are a tremendous number of artists that I don't work with, simply because the shipping and handling and trucking expenses are beyond what
Your budget is.
what our budget could ever possibly be. So there's that level of me constantly looking, what are the threads, because our mandate is art of our time. And we interpret that broadly, second half of the 20th century to today, so that there's a context for looking at contemporary work.
So now, are you looked upon by artists as a way to expand their? Because I've never seen it's not like you go into a business and they have the art piece and they have a little number and you go check what the price is.
Right.
You don't have that piece going.
No, because my piece is based on scholarship, connoisseurship, critical understanding of
like
the
a
dialogue.
peer-reviewed kind of stuff. in a
Pretty
way.
much, and
But it still benefits the artist to get their name and shown before other people.
and when you've got a museum show, even a regional institution such as ours, as opposed to the Museum of Modern Art or the Whitney Museum of American Art, it means a person who's dedicated their life to the scholarship of the contemporary art world is saying that your work is exemplary in some way. Where there are a lot of painters who are doing work, there are a lot of Sunday painters who are allowing
Sunday painter.
Well, Sunday painter, people who aren't professionally trained, or maybe they took some classes as an
Work on
undergraduate.
Sundays, okay.
Well, because they've got another life,
I know,
usually to
okay.
support themselves, I think. They're just
Okay.
called Sunday painters,
Didn't know
who are
that.
tapping into their creativity and maybe doing, quite, beautiful work. There is a level of critical discourse, about contemporary art and what it's saying about our society, what its intrinsic aesthetic worth is, what its extrinsic commentary is, that allows the intellect and the emotions and the spirit to all work together. That is exemplary. And we tend to show on the exemplary side of the spectrum as opposed to the other side of the spectrum.
Well, I think one of the successes is knowing what your mission is, knowing what your parameters are, and not trying to be everything to everybody.
I think that's true. That being said, because we're not a collecting institution, you say, well, what drives you? We have a matrix that we've developed over the years. It's approved by the Board of Trustees. It's an actual policy. And I have to work within that matrix. So it's always a series of balances over time. You can't do all of the things that we attempt to do every single rotation and in every single show. So for instance, there should be a balance between traditional media and new media. There should be a balance between work that is rich and more accessible than something that is completely conceptual and out there at the leading edge of what can be defined as art and aesthetic experience. And we try and balance those things constantly so people can say, you can come into our museum and just look at something and think, that's beautiful. I love being in front of it. It's quiet, it's contemplative, it's marvelous. And people who can say, wow, what's that artist up to and why? And boy, that pushes my buttons in a good way, or that pushes my buttons in a bad way, and why do I have resistance to it, and what is that artist trying to say to me? And so those are the kinds of things, a balance between local and regional artists on one end of the spectrum and national and even international artists on the other end of the spectrum. We don't just show the top 10.
Yeah, and you, but you're also, that the interpretation of where those things are is always fluid, so you're allowing all kinds of opinions to come in to the process.
And part of that is driven by an exhibition committee that meets once a month with me. As a matter of fact, I'm running from here to there. It's at 4 o'clock today. And the exhibition committee...
Are they all local people?
Are all local people. They tend to be artists. They tend to be art scholars. And they tend to be people who are collectors, people who have just a passion for art and ideas. They lifelong learners. So they're not exactly my peers because they're not academics in the way that I'm an academic. They're not running another institution. They're not another curator. But we have artists and craftspeople here who have regional and even national reputations who serve on the committee. We have, I can think of 2 women on the committee who are very involved with collecting themselves and have experience being on boards of other institutions, etc. A couple of them are board members too. That's part of the way a board committee works. We have a few top-level people working in, for instance, like the glass arts or pottery and ceramics. So in the commercial art world. And then we have...
the different genres.
Different genre. And then we have a few working artists who are also academics, faculty of Marlborough College. Let's put it, we'll put it right out there.
Yeah.
The wonderful faculty of Marlborough College that...
well, how lucky for them that there's a place to go so close to dip into this other arena and get into the practical world now, the academic, and apply their skills.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's this, they have their practice. They are working artists. They have their studio practice. They have their teaching. But then they have this other place to go that the world of ideas is coming from a critical point of view versus an art-making point of view or pedagogical point of view. It's also a wonderful way for us to meet people who are potential interns.
Always, connections.
Well, and
networking.
young people really do keep you fresh. They keep you on your toes. They keep you honest about what it is you're doing because you're mentoring them, and they call things into question because they have the sensibility of another generation. And now that Mara has white hair, we must listen to the sensibility of another generation.
Well, it's not mostly sensibility. It could be one of the questions that just like, you know it, but you haven't paid attention to it in a while, and that question gets you thinking about that.
And it pops up, and they come from their idea of new media is so much bigger than my idea of new media.
Well, I can see where you're going with that one. Yes.
But if that's where younger generation artists are going, and that's where the public of a different generation finds things exciting, rewarding, rich viewing experience, how to make meaning out of this, I have to take it seriously if I'm going to continue to work in art of our time and not ossify.